Go ahead, Dr. Tariq.
Okay. I would like to welcome everybody to our 8th event organized by Nile University. This time it's co-organized by the Nile University and the IEEE Egypt section, where our speaker is SK Ramesh, who will be talking about accreditation and quality of engineering education, giving us an IEEE perspective and an Abit perspective as well, explaining the role of both in this important topic. I'm going to start the event by asking our president, Dr. Tariq Khalil, to give his welcome message to all and to our guests and to tell us about what we are doing here. And I will take it from Dr. Tariq afterwards and we'll start with our guest. Dr. Tariq, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tariq. Good evening, everybody. It's indeed a pleasure to host with us today Dr. S.K. Ramesh, Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at California State University, Northridge. And indeed, it's a pleasure to have you with us, Dr. Ramesh. Your knowledge and your fame about all education, engineering education, and Abit education is certainly very important for all of us. And we are delighted to have you to share with us some of your thoughts and ideas. Indeed, this is the 8th in a series that we have started since COVID-19 to invite public speakers from all over the world to speak to our faculty, students, and to the community at large on subjects of interest to many of us here in Egypt and in the region and actually all over the world. So indeed, it's a pleasure to have you again. And we certainly would welcome interacting with you in the future. And IEEE is very important for us. We are hosting many events for IEEE. We have the regional director for IEEE from Nile University, and he is with us here today. And we are all excited to listen to you and to hear what is the latest about Abit accreditation and similar activities, particularly post-COVID-19. So without any further ado, I'd like to go back to Dr. Tariq. Maybe he would like to introduce our speaker more, or he can go ahead and get started. It's up to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq. I'm going to start by just a short introduction. I'm not going to take a lot of your time, but just to pave the way to what Ramesh is going to discuss and also give some kind of highlights or main organization points about how we will do this. So Ramesh will talk for about 45 to 50 minutes. We'll pose our questions until he finishes his talk, and after which we'll have the Q&A session. I have two of my colleagues at least helping me here under the supervision of our quality and accreditation professor, Dr. Tamer Hashmet. One of them taking the questions on Facebook, and the other one is taking the questions here in the Zoom session. So throughout Ramesh speech and afterwards, whenever you feel like you have a question, you can either write your question on the chat right here in Zoom, or you can write it on the comments on Facebook, knowing that we have colleagues there who are collecting the questions and posting them right here in a shared Google file. And I will be going through the questions, and when there is a need, I will also invite some of you who are asking questions to spell it out on their own if they want. But if there's so many questions about the same thing, I would simply save time by asking the question myself to Ramesh. And in order to get things smooth, we have also established a system to streamline the event. So at some points in time, it will be hard muted, meaning that you cannot unmute yourself. Most of the time you will be soft muted, so you can unmute yourself and whenever needed to speak. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us and to come here. Before I give the floor to Ramesh, just for a couple of minutes to give an idea about where we are here in terms of what IEEE does, because many of us, especially academicians and researchers who publish in IEEE conferences and journals, we are familiar with certain activities of the IEEE, but not necessarily all others. Or maybe we don't know about those others enough as much as we know about IEEE publications and conferences. So this simple chart gives you an idea about the main things that IEEE actually does. There is a whole section of IEEE, which is IEEE USA, which pretty much is a smaller unit of global IEEE that's focused in the US. But we have educational activities, we have publication services and products. We have MGA, members and geographical activities. We have standards, and we also have committees reporting directly to the IEEE Board of Directors. And of course, we have the Technical Activities Board tab, which is probably, according to many, is the largest unit in IEEE. So most activities that relates to societies and councils of the IEEE are under the tab here, where I'm trying to put my cursor here. Standards is a very big business of IEEE that not many of us know about. Egypt section, along with all sections and chapters all over the world, will be under MGA, this box. Pubs, all publications, all magazines and journals and newsletters even are under PSPB. And what we are talking about today is under educational activities. So, and I cannot underline enough, or I cannot highlight enough the fact that education activities is a spectrum of activities as far as IEEE is concerned. IEEE is celebrating the anniversary of the IEEE Learning Network, which is one of the big educational platforms that has been produced, and this was produced really, or the initiative was started under Ramesh when he was the VP of Educational Activities. But under educational activities also, there is the part that deals with Abet. Many people don't know that IEEE actually represents the electrical and computer engineering community when it comes to Abet. Abet is an organization, the membership of which is not for individuals. It's an organization, it has society members. And the IEEE is the society or the organization that represents electrical and computer engineering mainly, and also co-represent with other fields, but electrical and computer engineering is our arena. So here comes, so IEEE has a lot to do with education, with academia, through the role that Abit does all over the world in accredited programs. So I wanted to put this into perspective and probably save Ramesh some time as he moves on and talk about his subject directly. Ramesh is a professor of electrical and computer engineering at California State University in Northridge, where he was a dean actually for quite some time, more than a decade. He retired his administrative job, lucky him, and he's now more into the scholarly work and leading a huge US Department of Education sponsored project, which has made a lot of accomplishments. It's a mega project by all standards. Before joining California State University Northridge, he was with California State University Sacramento, where he was also department chair at some point in time of electrical and computer engineering. Ramesh is an experienced program evaluator, Abit program evaluator, or IEEE program evaluator, depending on how you want to look at it, because IEEE actually assigns PEVs for the Abit visits. And he was elected to the Abit Board of Directors lately, a few months ago in November 2019. He was a vice president of educational activities for 2 terms, 2016 and 2017. And this is a point in time where we get to know each other a lot. I had the honor of working with him in the board at that time frame, and we did a lot of work that I'm proud of together. He also served as the IEEE Eta Kappa Nu president. He served in several IEEE boards, the IEEE Board of Directors itself, Education Activities Board, Eta Kappa Nu Board of Governors, Publication, PSPB Board and Awards Board, and before his current Abit appointment, he was in the Abit Board of Delegates. He served in the IEEE Fellow Committee and in several other important committees. Ramesh is recognized in many ways, probably not the least of which that he is an IEEE Fellow, and he received lots of awards and recognitions, some sample of which are just listed before your eyes. Last but not least, Ramesh is running this year as a candidate for the IEEE presidentship to be the 2021 IEEE president-elect. I guess most of you as members have probably gotten the emails announcing the launch of the election soon. And I encourage you to vote always, because it's important to be active and to voice your opinion about what's going on and to elect the right people for the right positions to serve the society. The 2 other colleagues who are running with or against Ramesh, depending on how you look at it, are Sefour Rahman from Virginia Tech and Reidu from the University of Maryland at College Park. This brings me pretty much to the end of the introduction I wanted to give, and I'm going to relinquish the floor for Ramesh. Ramesh, please share your slides. Ramesh was kind enough actually to start his slides was one where I mean, he's just putting me there. I would like to declare that I had nothing to do with this. It's just his generosity and probably his friendship. Ramesh, the floor is yours. Please take your time and go ahead, and the questions will be asked after we finish.
Thank you so much, Professor El-Babab. Again, Tariq, really, really wonderful to see you again in person, in Zoom, virtually. President Khalil, thank you for the gracious invitation. Dean Hassan, it's great to be with all of you in Egypt. And Tariq is too modest. He gave a very, very gracious introduction. That photograph, Tariq, was taken in 2017 during the Technical Activities Board meeting. And ILN, the IEEE Learning Network that Tariq was talking about, was really an initiative that came up from a spark that he created. He was in the Continuing Education Committee on Educational Activities. And we were talking about how we could increase collaboration between all the units of IEEE. IEEE has tremendous content, technical content. Our members create conferences, publications, standards galore. But the biggest challenge we have in IEEE is sharing this information widely so that every member, no matter where she or he lives, can access that information. So that's how the idea behind ILN started. Professor Marina Ruggieri, who's there in the center, was a vice president for technical activities at that time. And this is truly a team effort. It took a lot of work on the part of a lot of people to bring it to fruition. So I want to thank you, Tariq. It's been really wonderful knowing you, and it's a great honor and privilege to speak to you today about Abet. The aspect that caught my attention when President Khalil was talking was he mentioned that this was the 8th in a series related to COVID-19. So I thought I would take poetic license and read a small passage to you before we get started with the actual presentation itself. And I'm pretty sure you will recognize almost instantaneously where this is from. So, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of incredulity, it was a season of light. It was a season of darkness. It was a spring of hope, it was a winter of despair. We had everything before us, we had nothing before us. We were all going direct to heaven, we were all going direct the other way. Ladies and gentlemen, in the immortal words of Charles Dickens from A Tale of Two Cities, if Charles Dickens were here today, he may as well be an IEEE member and talking about COVID-19 and how we're responding to COVID-19. Incredibly, incredibly important. IEEE is a tremendous organization, globally connected with local impact. And here we are today, you in Egypt, we have people all over the world live streaming on Facebook, and we make it seamless. We make it almost incomprehensible 50 years ago that one could do something like this. And yet these things are happening, right? Now, when we think about it from a quality perspective, this is where accreditation comes in. So I hope during the next 40 minutes or so that I'll share with you some perspectives on the role of accreditation and particularly how IEEE plays an important aspect when it comes to accreditation. So with that said, let's jump right in. I want to thank my colleagues on the Abet staff. Dr. Michael Milligan is the Executive Director and CEO of Abet. And incidentally, he's an electrical engineer. Many years ago when I was Dean at Cal State Northridge, I'm still at Cal State Northridge, but when I was Dean, the first Abet visit that I hosted, he was actually the program evaluator for our computer engineering program. This was before he was on the staff at Abet, and he used to work in the industry at the time. Jessica Silvick is our CFO and COO. So a number of the slides that I'm sharing will be with permission from Abet, and I definitely want to share them with you. The other aspect that as we get into the presentation, you'll recognize that there are a number of Abet accredited programs in Egypt. And actually, Tarek, I modified the slides a little bit to show you where those programs are, because I suspect that some of those faculty are also on this call today. So special thanks to both of them, right? So here's what we're going to talk about, right? So I have basically 6 topics. We'll begin by talking about why accreditation is important, particularly now in this situation, right? COVID-19 has changed a lot of things, but the one thing it cannot change is the grit, determination, and persistence that we have as engineers. Because fundamentally, as engineers, we're problem solvers, right? We are used to solving problems. We're used to solving open-ended problems. And we really have a grand challenge before us where nature is telling us, how are you going to balance life and do that in a sustainable way? That is a challenge we face with COVID-19. And I believe you'll not only overcome that, we will come out of this looking very, very happy, very sustainable for the future. You can tell already that I'm a very optimistic person. And I believe in that spirit of optimism, that human spirit that raises all of us to that next level. Then we'll talk about accreditation principles, how Abet is engaged globally. Abet is a global accreditor in a variety of areas. And then transition to IEEE's role, because IEEE is the largest member society, as Tarek explained so kindly. We'll take a brief glimpse at Abet accreditation criteria. Again, this is an ocean, right, literally. And you could spend a whole day talking about each of the criteria, how they get implemented and so forth. And I'm very happy to come back to you at a later time, Tarek, to get into more detail on how the criteria are implemented. And then finally, when Tarek and I were planning this whole session, he wanted to know how Abet was adapting to all the changes that we see around us. Would you believe that in this cycle, all the Abet visits are going to be handled virtually? Let me repeat. Every single Abet visit during the coming cycle is going to be handled virtually. In other words, nobody is going to step on an airplane, nobody's going to step on a bus, train, etc., to go to any university. Everybody is going to be globally dispersed, and yet we're going to accredit or review for accreditation approximately 1,000 programs. That to me is the essence of Abet, right? Adapting to be very successful. All right, I've given you a preview. A lot of you are used to seeing movies on Netflix right now. So I have to start with the preview first. And then now that the trailer is done, let's get to the main part of the movie. So why does accreditation matter, right? So you ask the question. Well, accreditation matters for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, it is to demonstrate that the graduates who come out of the university, like Nile University, are really prepared to enter the profession. And second, this is an important aspect of Abet accreditation, that the institutions are committed to improving the students' educational experience. Now, this is important because when you think about the institutions, all the institutions are different, right? Each institution has a mission, they have a vision, they deliver programs that reflect on that mission and vision. But the one common thread, no matter which institution, which program that you're talking about, is that everybody is looking at how can we make it better for our students. So this is an important aspect of accreditation. Not only that you're preparing graduates to enter the profession, but also focused on continuous improvement so that you're improving the student's educational experience. Okay. It also provides value. So your students know that if they come to an accredited program, they have a professional career waiting for them. Institutions are able to talk to parents, to legislators, to funding agencies. Faculty know that if they come to the environment here, they can perform research, they can work with students. And more importantly, industry, the global industry and the general public knows that the graduates from an Abet accredited program or an accredited program are in fact prepared to meet those demands of the profession, right? So a little bit of history about Abet. Tariq alluded to the fact that Abet is a federation of member societies. Just to give you an idea, we've added approximately one member society every year for the last decade or so. So currently we have 36 member societies. IEEE is one of those member societies. And Abet was actually founded over 85 years ago in 1932. Back then it was called the Engineers Council for Professional Development, or ECPD. And it is a non-profit, non-governmental organization which is responsible for accrediting programs. This is very important because Abet does not accredit institutions. Abet accredits programs in colleges and universities in 4 disciplines: applied and natural science, computing, engineering, and engineering and technology. And we'll get into the numbers in a few minutes, but it's a truly global organization. And IEEE is one of those founding members. We've been together with Abet since 1932. Okay? So the value proposition, again, as we briefly explained, is that we want to assure employers that students are prepared to enter the workforce, and our approach, the criteria, the processes, everything we do inspires confidence, right? If you look at the Abet logo, in fact, the logo on my shirt right there, I'm pointing in the wrong direction. There it is. It stands for be confident. You're confident in your processes, you're confident in your criteria, and you're confident in the implementation of those criteria so that the world that our graduates are entering is safer, more efficient, more comfortable, and more sustainable. Again, can you read COVID-19 today, right? We want to create a world that is safer, more efficient, more comfortable, more sustainable. That's what we're all working towards. So Abet's mission is very much aligned with the future, the world future, as we envision when we come out of COVID-19. Notice I said not if, when we come out of COVID-19. What else do we do? Value to industry. Because when you think about your graduates, construction engineering, civil engineering, manufacturing engineering, electrical engineering, mechatronics, computer engineering, computer science, no matter what your graduates are in, they want to enter a profession showing that they really understand that they can apply what they've learned in the classroom. It's not about textbook knowledge. It is about demonstrating those outcomes. So Abet works very closely with industry because they want to know, what are students actually learning? What is their experience like? And how are they able to help industry in pursuing these goals? So we go on to our second part of the webinar, which is now talking about the principles of accreditation, now that you have a flavor as to what Abet is as a global organization. So it's a non-governmental organization. It is an unbiased, impartial review, right? Why is this the case? Because the people involved in this are professional practitioners from industry, educators, from government, etc. The criteria are uniform, and the criteria are actually defined by the member societies. The policies and procedures are all defined by the member societies. So these are applied no matter where you are. In other words, if you have an Abet visit in the United States, you have an Abet visit in Egypt, the same criteria are applied regardless of your location, right? It applies to a single program, right? Now, there are regional accreditors. For example, I live in California. I teach in the California State University system, and we have a body called the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. They accredit the entire university. So our university has 8 colleges. They come and look at the educational experience of all students across all colleges. Abet does not do that. What Abet does is focus on individual programs. So if you have graduates in a particular program, Abet accreditation simply says that the graduates from that program graduated from an Abet accredited program, right? So it's very, very specific and program specific. The other part is critical. Abet's accreditation is voluntary. No one is telling you that you have to do it. This is something that the institutions want to do. This is something that the institutions care about and say, we want to do this to prepare graduates for practice. We want to do this so that they're prepared for industry, right? It also requires introspection and self-assessment. Who does this? The faculty. the faculty and the students need to be thinking about where they are today, where they want to be in the future, and how they're going to get there. And at the same time, we do something called formative assessment. So your curriculum, your courses, your labs, your discussions, etc., you're constantly looking at that to see, are the students learning? I'm often asked the question, how does Abet evaluate teaching? Abet does not evaluate teaching. Abet evaluates how students are learning and in the process demonstrating the outcomes that are required in order for them to be proficient for professional practice. It is a continuous process, very important, right? So unlike certain processes where you take a measurement at some discrete point in time, and then a year later, 2 years later, you go and measure it, this is a continuous process. It may have a certain cadence to it, may have a certain timeline to it, time constant if you're an electrical engineer, but no matter what the time constant, every constituent is going to be involved in the process at some frequency, and data is collected, data is analyzed, data is used to make continuous improvement, okay? Here's another important thing. Abet has general criteria and program-specific criteria. You cannot make up a shortcoming in one criteria by doing really well in another criteria. In other words, you have to meet all the criteria. So failure to comply with one single standard means you cannot be accredited, right? So it's very, very important for programs to understand this, that you have to satisfy all the criteria. Very important, right? We get this question a lot. Does Abet rank programs? And the answer is unequivocally no. We do not rank programs. This is all about the programs looking internally. This is about the programs looking at their constituents and seeing how they can continuously improve themselves in order to satisfy the criteria. So all the Abet accreditation does is that at the time of the visit, the program complies with the standards, and based on that, based on the review by this independent impartial group of evaluators and the commissions, we act to say that the program is accredited. We do not rank programs. In fact, I'll show you in a moment how the Abet accreditation is publicized. It shows you what the term of accreditation is, when the accreditation begins, and how long the accreditation lasts, right? It doesn't even tell you what the shortcomings and so forth are, because all of that is confidential between the program and Abet. And the idea, again, is to use the confidential process to continuously improve the program. Okay. Let's talk about some of the critical principles around Abet. There are 4 principles in this quadrant. First, the program is responsible for setting what are known as objectives. You set those objectives by involving the constituents. You get to define who your constituents are: students, faculty, employers, industry, government, graduate school. And then you go through and deliver a program, a curriculum. You go through a process. You write a self-study report. You're measuring how you're complying against the criteria. You engage your students in this process, and you're doing continuous improvement by assessing student outcomes. Then you act on that assessment and make improvements to the program, to the content and structures, etc. So this is a continuous process with a cadence, with a timeline, so that all the constituents are involved and the program is introspectively reflecting on what is important in order for the program to prepare graduates to meet professional practice and assure their constituents. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about Abet's global engagement, now that you've seen why it matters and what the principles are, right? So thinking about Abet's global engagement, globally, we have something known as the International Engineering Alliance. And there are memoranda of understanding between international accrediting bodies. So Abet, again, if you think about it, a non-governmental, non-profit body that is a part of the International Engineering Alliance. There are 4 critical accords. The first one is called the Washington Accord. This is from 1989. There are 20 full signatories and 8 provisional signatories. There is a Sydney Accord, which is engineering and technology focused. Again, there are 11 full signatories, 2 provisional. A Dublin Accord that looks at engineering technicians, but in the applied science area or associate's degree. There are 9 full signatories. And a Seoul Accord, which is based on computing, computer science, etc. Again, there are 8 full signatories and 6 provisional signatories, excuse me. So Abet's commitment to global technical education extends beyond just the United States. It's a global commitment where we work with all of these representative bodies around the world through these accords. We also have something known as substantial equivalency, which is different than mutual recognition. So we'll explain what that means in a minute. So if you think about the Washington Accord, and you're keeping track on the previous screen, the original signatories of the Washington Accord were 6. So in 1989, you had the United States, Canada, Ireland, United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Okay? And then in the 1990s, 2 more came on to the Washington Accord. In other words, South Africa and Hong Kong. So remember, the bodies in these 2 countries that represent higher education, particularly in engineering, were becoming members of the Washington Accord. So how does this happen? So the International Engineering Alliance has something known as the attributes of a global engineer. So they talk about the various attributes that graduates that graduate from an Abet accredited program or any one of these accredited programs that are part of the Washington Accord are expected to meet. So there is collaboration between these agencies. There is a common understanding of what those skills, knowledge, and abilities are that graduates need to demonstrate at the time of graduation. Then as you go into the 2000s, we added 5 more countries: Singapore, Malaysia, Chinese Taipei, Korea, and Japan. Okay? Go back another decade, now we can see it is increasing. 7 more full signatories: Peru, Turkey, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, India, Russia, right, came on in 2010. And then these are the ones that have provisional status: Mexico, Costa Rica, Chile, Bangladesh, Thailand, Myanmar, Philippines, and Indonesia. So the way this works is within Abet, there are a number of councils. There is a council called the Global Council, right? I actually sat on the Global Council for a number of years when I was in the Board of Delegates. Currently, I'm in the Board of Directors. So what does the Global Council do? So when we get a request, say, from the organization that represents higher education in Mexico, wanting to be a signatory to the Washington Accord, first, they need to be approved to be a provisional signatory, which they are. And then the Global Council and members of the International Engineering Alliance that are already signatories of the Washington Accord provide mentoring to this body. So they may have institutions with programs that do local accreditation. So members from full Washington Accord signatory countries will visit them, mentor them, work with them over a period of time. And then at some point in time, that country, that organization, is able to come back to IEA and say, we are ready for full signatory status. So at that time, the full signatories, remember currently there are 20, they will evaluate the data and each one of the signatories gets a vote to say, is this group from this country that is provisionally a signatory ready for being a full signatory? That's the process, right? So Abet as a full signatory on the Washington Accord, I sat on the Global Council, so I'd get these agreements, my council would work on it, and then whoever is the representative of the council would go to the International Engineering Alliance in order to support that proposition to bring that new board onto that circuit. So just to give you an idea how global accreditation works around the world. Okay, why do we do this? We want to make the world a better place, right? We want to increase the quality of STEM education. If you think about where we are right now, you're seeing tremendous levels of cooperation and collaboration. People are racing to find a cure, find a vaccine, to find a solution to COVID-19. People are looking at what the world is going to become when we come out of COVID-19. What kind of jobs will exist? How do we prepare graduates for this future? So industry is very interested. Education has been transformed almost overnight. We need to adapt. And we also have the connections with our global member societies because they set the standards for their disciplines. IEEE sets the standard for a variety of disciplines, from electrical computer engineering all the way to telecommunications engineering that Professor Al-Bawab is very, very familiar with. Expanding our membership. And also we bring our PEVs, our program evaluators and team chairs from all over the world because we really, really believe that this is a global organization. It needs to reflect the global values, the global perspectives that all of us have. Let me put another spin on this. I think everybody on this call in Egypt and the rest of the world is very familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I show them to you on this slide: eliminating poverty, eliminating hunger, providing good health care, providing quality education programs, Gender equality. This has become a very important topic right now, particularly with COVID-19, because what you're finding out is that certain populations are getting disproportionately affected by COVID-19 based on their economic conditions, based on their social conditions, based on the cultural issues that affected them over centuries. So gender equality is important, equity is important, inclusion is important, diversity is very important. Clean water, sanitation, because without clean water and healthcare, you're going to be dealing with a lot of pandemics, maybe more pandemics down the road. Clean energy, fossil fuels are not unlimited. We need to create renewable sources of energy. And by the way, as an aside, I predict that this is going to be the biggest economic driver when we come out of COVID-19. In other words, clean energy, because increasingly we're going to be looking for local sources of energy, right? Globalization is great because we've created a huge supply chain. There are products being designed in different parts of the world that are shipped all over the place. But now we need to be thinking about how we use our local resources to produce these products and processes that we've taken for granted for a long time. You jump into an Uber, you don't even think about it, or you order a product on Amazon and it shows up at your doorstep the next day. Now we need to be thinking about sustainably, how do we create these processes? Providing good jobs, economic growth with innovation, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities, responsible consumption. Our children, our grandchildren need to inherit a planet that is safe, sustainable, and peaceful and harmonious. Protect the planet, life on land, life underwater, peace and justice, partnerships. All of these factors are critical and play a part when it comes to accreditation. When you start talking about accreditation criteria, you find that these elements are embedded within our criteria, because we have students that serve society by their projects through their curriculum, the mission of the university, the vision of the university. So Abet accreditation, I think, drives forward sustainable development in a very, very positive way. And incidentally, I sit on a council right now called the IDEA Council. IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity Advisory Council. So we started out, we've been working on this for a number of years. This just didn't start out in the last 3 months. And we felt like we needed to provide definitions of inclusion, of diversity, and equity. Now, the moment you start saying definitions, and Abet being a global organization, the definition has to be universal. It has to be global. It has to be inclusive, pardon the pun, to bring all the different groups together. So at the moment, we've created a draft set of definitions that the board of directors is actually going to review and vote on August 4th. And once that is done, we will be putting that out for public comment. So anybody anywhere in the world can look at the definition and say, perhaps you're missing this aspect and you need to include this aspect. The idea is, eventually, if you're going to accredit programs, you're going to accredit them based on criteria. It's important for all the programs to be on the same baseline to understand what the definitions mean before you begin accrediting programs. Okay. I've already told you about the member societies, so just a brief cartoon showing you who the member societies are, 36 of them. They represent over 1.5 million practicing professionals, and they span the gamut, right? Some of them are very large, some of them are very small, but they really span the gamut when it comes to Abet. Industry partners, a lot of industry partners, again, bringing that industry perspective. So what is the role of member societies in Abet? They represent the profession, they develop program criteria, they're also very involved in governance, and I'll show you that in a minute. They nominate commissioners, they recruit and assign program evaluators. So this is an important slide, and the heart of Abet is this operational box that you see here. So there are 4 commissions: Applied and Natural Science, Computing, Engineering, Engineering and Technology. So the commissions are made up of members who come from the member societies. So they lead the review teams, they're responsible for the final accreditation actions. In fact, the whole of last week, I was sitting on a virtual commission meeting, starting Saturday a week ago up until Sunday morning, where we went through every single program that was reviewed in the last cycle to come up with the accreditation changes. We also implement policies, we propose changes to the criteria. Oftentimes, if you're a program, the person that you see is a program evaluator. They're the person who actually shows up in your campus, or not, because this year it's all going to happen virtually. They provide the initial recommendations, quote unquote, they're the face of Abet, that's who you see, and they provide the largest pool of volunteers. This is the operational side of Abet, the heart of Abet. Then we have 2 boards, a board of delegates and a board of directors. As Tariq was mentioning, up until last year, I served on the board of delegates. So I represented IEEE on the board of delegates. So I was nominated by IEEE. And the role of the delegates is to approve these policies that come out of the commission. So when the commissions propose a policy, for example, the criteria on inclusion, diversity, equity, if it is specific to engineering, that would go to the engineering board of delegates, to the board of delegates, right? First to the area delegation and to the board of delegates. They approve the criteria. The board of directors is a much smaller body. So my role right now in November, I was elected to the board of directors to represent all of the engineering societies. So there is an engineering area delegation. 32 of the 36 societies are part of the engineering area delegation. And that group, there's probably about 50 voting members, they elected me as the chair. And by virtue of that, I sit on the Abet board of directors. The Abet board of directors has a total of 13 members, including Dr. Milligan, who's an ex officio non-voting member. So each of the chairs of the delegations, the 3 Ps, as we call them, the past president, the president-elect, and the president, a secretary and a treasurer. We also have public board members, 1 representing industry, 1 representing higher education, and then an entirely non-society representative who is also on the board of directors. So Abet really brings together different perspectives. And we also deal with the appeals processes. So if there's an issue during accreditation, it comes up before the board of directors because we're not directly involved in accreditation. Just as an aside, up until last year on the board of delegates, I was actually able to go out and do visits as a PEV. However, now on the board of directors, I'm no longer allowed to do that because the appeals would come to the board of directors. So we have lots of checks and balances in place. Again, we've been through this. It's a peer review process. Accreditation is tried to continuous improvement. Very important for those of you, it's an ISO 9001 process certified. This is a quality management standard. So Abet's processes are very rigorous. Internally, we have a number of checks and balances and loops that we close in order to ensure that processes are being followed. Global numbers, over 4,000 programs, 800 institutions. You see the numbers in the US and the numbers outside the United States, roughly 20% outside the United States. Now, this is the same breakdown, but it shows you the breakdown by the global population. And if you look at this here, I focus on Egypt. Egypt currently has 24 programs that are Abet accredited. Again, the size of the programs is related very closely here. If you look at the largest bar here, 69%, more than 2/3 are in engineering globally. And the same is true across the institutions. And then the second biggest bar is computing, CAC, technology, then computing, and then finally applied and natural science. So it goes from right to left in that order. So just to give you a perspective of where the programs are growing. So this is the extra slide that I added today. These are the programs that are currently accredited by Abet in Egypt. And you can find this if you just go to abet.org. You can go to search and type in country, Egypt, and it'll pull up all these programs, just like I'm showing you right here. And they're primarily in 3 institutions: American University in Cairo, Arab Academy for Science and Technology, and Arab Academy for Science and Technology in a different location. And you see there's a variety of programs from computer engineering, petroleum engineering, biology, construction engineering, etc. right? This here shows you the dates of accreditation. So October 1, 2013, meaning that is the date from which the accreditation began. That's the initial date of accreditation. Some of these programs have been accredited for a number of years. Construction engineering at the American University in Cairo has been accredited since 1995, right? So you can look at this information. You can also look at which commissions are actually accrediting and responsible for which programs. These are the areas in which we're seeing a lot of growth: construction management, cybersecurity engineering, chemistry, physics, biology, geology, because we have, again, applied natural science, microbiology. So don't assume that Abet only accredits programs in engineering and engineering technology. It's a very, very broad field. And in different commissions, environmental science, mathematics, even facility management. At the moment, we're also looking at program criteria for fields such as mechatronics. And we'll talk about that in a moment when we talk about criteria. So what is IEEE's role? By now, I think you have a pretty good idea. IEEE is a global organization. Innovation is the core of what we do. Everything we do is for the benefit of humanity. Standards, publications, conferences, our members are creating tremendous resources to help technical professionals everywhere. From an educational perspective, it is very important for the public to trust the information that they receive. So you look at the core values of IEEE: trust, service to humanity, integrity, global community building, partnership, and growth. And this is the reason why the public comes to us as a trusted source of educational service to support lifelong learning. So when somebody says there's a graduate from an Abet accredited program, they know that behind that person, there is processes, there is systems, there is institutions, there's programs in place that ensure that the public can be assured that they're actually prepared to practice. And so we inspire a worldwide audience by building these communities to do all of these things. So IEEE is very, very interested in accreditation. Again, we've already talked about the structure, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. PEVs, the board of directors, delegates, the area delegations and commissions, and member societies. Very important. The member society does not accredit the program. So IEEE does not accredit the program. IEEE is part of Abet. Abet accredits the programs, right? And these are all the different fields that IEEE is involved in. So from bioengineering all the way to telecommunications engineering, variety of fields. Sometimes IEEE will be the lead society, for example, in electrical engineering. Sometimes we will be the co-lead society. Say cybersecurity engineering may be led by CSAB, which is a computer science accreditation board, and IEEE will be a co-lead society. What does this mean? It means when criteria are developed, the professionals from both member societies will have a voice in developing the criteria. So it's pretty clear why IEEE needs to be interested. Obviously, we want graduates to have all of these skills, knowledge, and abilities when they go into practice. It's very important for us, competent professionals. We also want to ensure that the criteria reflect what is current in the profession. So we're constantly talking internally within our commissions and our committees and our various boards and so on, what is relevant in the field, what is relevant in the discipline, and we use our processes to ensure that the accreditation criteria reflects that. And professional development. I can't tell you how much I've learned being a program evaluator. I mean, I was a dean for 12 years, I was a department chair for 13 years. I cannot tell you how much my involvement in Abet, my involvement in IEEE has helped me understand and helped my program in turn implement the processes in such a way it benefits the students whom I'm serving. So it's a huge community. So for these three reasons, it's a very important sustainable pyramid of values: competent professionals, professional development, educational criteria that come together to support IEEE's mission. It's a global mission advancing technology for humanity through the contributions of our members. This is what some of the folks that are part of Abet say about their involvement. They're all IEEE members, from Ray Floyd, John Samarco. John actually just got elected to the board of delegates. He's going to be taking my seat because I moved on to the board of directors. Mark Law, Fran Harakowitz, who's on our commission right now, and then past president Dr. Barry Shoup, General Barry Shoup, who's now dean at Cooper Union. They've all been involved in Abet, right? And they all talk about the benefits of Abet accreditation from the perspective of industry, from the perspective of the students, from the perspective of the institution. But it goes back to the fundamental principles. Are your graduates prepared for professional practice? And how can you improve yourself continuously in order to make that happen? So just a snapshot. On the left on this pie chart, you see the total number of programs, so 4,144, out of which 873 are outside the United States. And on the right, you're seeing IEEE. So IEEE has about 1,000 of these 4,000 programs, right? Namely about 20 to 25%. And within IEEE, 229 of these programs are outside the United States. So just so you understand. So all of these programs are up for review. Let me give you another snapshot really quickly. And this snapshot is, in a given year, out of these 4,000 programs, maybe about a quarter of them are up for review, right? Roughly 1,000 programs. So in this accreditation cycle, all of these programs are going to be reviewed virtually. And we'll talk about how that is going to work in a minute. So first things first, accreditation criteria. So we already talked about students, how it's important for students to demonstrate their learning outcomes. Now, in order for them to demonstrate their learning outcomes, if I use electrical engineering as an example, they start with a curriculum that is built maybe on calculus and physics and chemistry, and they learn about engineering sciences, statics, dynamics, circuits, etc. Then they move on to courses in systems and communications, microprocessors, and eventually they start putting things together. They have a culminating design experience, and the faculty are responsible for delivering this curriculum in such a way that they're demonstrating these outcomes. So a number of parts play an important role in the students demonstrating these learning outcomes, beginning with how the students are advised when they come into the program. What are the prerequisites? What classes do you need to complete? What do you need to learn? What are the policies and procedures? What are the examination structures? What are the quiz structures? How is all this going to be implemented? Do you have tutoring? What is the curriculum? How many courses do you take in a semester? How many credits do you earn? How is it graded? What do the faculty do? How are they involved in the program? What kind of facilities do you have? Laboratories, discussion features, lectures, etc. And then what is the institutional support? On the call today, we have President Khalil, Dean Hussain, we have Dean Al-Bawab, all the faculty. How are you all working together to make this happen so that the learning outcomes are being demonstrated, right? So it's a continuous loop. And the Abet criteria holistically come out of these pillars. So pay very close attention to these pillars, and you can see how each of these pillars becomes part of the Abet criteria. So if I show you the next slide, so student admissions, advising, etc., comes under criteria 1. Criterion 2 through 4 are focused on outcomes, objectives, outcomes, and continuous improvement. So that's criterion 2 through 4. 5 is curriculum, 6 is faculty, 7 is facilities, and 8 is institutional support. Again, for perspective, I'll go back one slide. You're talking about demonstrating outcomes based on all of these pillars, and the Abet criteria naturally flow from all of these. The policies and procedures that you see at the base of that is the glue that holds everything together. This is what we call Abet general criteria, okay? Now, it's very important to understand that the criteria vary depending on the commission. We already saw there are 4 commissions, and they have different criteria. Now, some criteria are common across all the commissions, and we'll see which ones they are. Criterion 1, Criterion 2, Criterion 4, 7, and 8. 1 is on students, 2 is on objectives, 4 is on continuous improvement, 7 is on facilities, and 8 is on institutional support. So no matter which commission your program falls under, these criteria are all going to be the same. What is left? Outcomes, number 3, curriculum, number 5, and faculty, number 6. These are commission specific. So these are what we call the non-harmonized parts of the criteria. So again, I got ahead of myself. I pretty much told you what was coming up on the movie. So 1 through 8, these are the general criteria. 1, 2, 4, 7, and 8 are common to all the commissions. 3, 5, and 6 are non-harmonized, right? So they are separate for each of the commissions. Then you have this bottom there that says program criteria. This is a very important part. Professor Al-Bawab, who's on the call today, he was uniquely responsible for developing the program criteria that we use today in telecommunications engineering. He led the effort because of his industry experience, because of the tremendous work that he did as an academic before he came to Nile University. By the way, Nile University is very fortunate to have him. He led the effort to make this happen, to bring the criteria to 4 for telecommunications engineering. So in the same way we have for different aspects, electrical engineering, computer engineering, etc. So we also have something known as the APPN. This stands for the Accreditation Policy and Procedure Manual. Now this gets into the logistics. Who is eligible? Who conducts the evaluations? How do you release the information? How do you do the appeals, etc.? But the Abet criteria for accrediting programs is usually filled in for a specific program. So it will say computer engineering, it'll say electrical engineering, etc. And you look at all of these criteria in this order, okay? Now let's look at the process. If you do not have an Abet accredited program, if your institution has no program that is Abet accredited, it's the first time that you're doing this, you need to do what is known as a readiness review. Now this is basically a draft self-study without all of the elements that go into the full self-study. So you prepare this, it'll talk about your students, it'll talk about your facilities, about your faculty. It's really looking to see if it's sustainable, if you have processes in place to deliver your curriculum, etc. You send this to Abet, and you have to do this by November 1st. There is an internal group within Abet, there are adjuncts in Abet that review this, and they can come up with 3 possible recommendations. They can either come back to you and say, this looks good, you can go ahead and submit a request for accreditation, or they may tell you, we found a few things here that maybe you should go back and take care of before you actually apply for accreditation. Or they can simply tell you, we don't think you're ready yet. You really need to look at this more closely before you come back up. Again, this is a no obligation type of readiness review. It has no bearing on the final accreditation, by the way. This is something that every program, initial accreditation, has to do. And it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the United States. If you don't have an Abet accredited program, the first step, again, is to do what is known as a readiness review. The request for evaluation, then, is submitted by January 31. It has to be signed by the Chief Executive Officer. In your case, President Khalil would be the one who's signing it. Then the deans would work together. They provide an official transcript. If the transcript happens to be in Arabic, let's say, you need to provide a translation in English, because all of the languages are different. You know, I've done visits all over the world where they speak Spanish, where they speak Arabic, where they speak Hindi. No matter what the language is, we expect that all the documentation is provided in English for the reviews. What is the accreditation team? So if you look at the accreditation team, every accreditation team will have an evaluator. The evaluator is a person, the PEV, who comes from the society, right? And then the team has a team chair, and that person is a commissioner. So if a given program has, say, electrical engineering, I could be the PEV. There could be a PEV for chemical engineering, mechanical engineering, and so on. And we all come under the Engineering Accreditation Commission. So there'll be a team chair from the Engineering Accreditation Commission. Let's say Nile University also has a program in computer science. Then the program evaluator for computer science will come from that different commission, the computing commission. The team chair will come from that commission. So you get the idea. Depending on the program, which commission it comes under, you have different teams that come together. You may have more than one commission on a particular visit. The visit is very, very rigorous. Once it is done, you get an initial finding from the team. That's a draft statement. Then you get a chance to respond, etc. It goes through a rigorous editing process. And I found out a week ago, I sat on what's known as the consistency committee. What do? We look at all the reviews across all the programs that were visited in the last cycle. So in the last cycle, out of the 1,000 programs, maybe about 700 were in engineering. So we look at all the programs that were evaluated, all the shortcomings, and we ensure that we are consistent. In other words, are we consistent within the institution? Are we consistent across all the programs, that we are treating them all the same way when it comes to the criteria? That's how Abet justifies its ISO 9001 status. Quality management is fundamental, intrinsic to our process. This is just a timeline that shows you where it starts. So typically November with the readiness review. January, the institution can request the evaluation. Then between February and May, you prepare your self-study. The visit will happen sometime between September and December. Between March and June, the team is actually assigned. Draft statements are sent between December and February. So now you're already 1 year in. So the next year, between February and April, you have a chance to respond to that accreditation visit and tell Abet what you did in order to address any findings that were there. If there was a shortcoming, this is what you're doing to address it. And some of those shortcomings may be mitigated. They may actually go away in the final analysis. So May and June, the commissions will make the adjustments. And finally in July, last week, as it happened, the commission will meet to make the final accreditation action. We first notify the institutions before we do it publicly, and then the institution status, the program accreditation status is released publicly. So very rigorous process, goes from 18 to 21 months. It's 18 if you need a readiness review, 21, excuse me, if you need a readiness review, 18 if your program is previously accredited and you're just applying for a reaccreditation. So that's just the timeline of the process. Finally, we're getting close to the end of our talk right here. I want to talk about what is happening with COVID-19 and how Abet is adapting to COVID-19. So I entitled this A Rapidly Changing Landscape. So before COVID-19, and it almost seems like hundreds of years ago, but barely 6 months ago, you walked into any university campus, you would see students seated out there in the lawn, perhaps with their laptops, perhaps sharing information, talking to one another, learning courses, doing their labs, etc. And literally overnight, everything that we knew, everything that we took for granted went completely virtual. So yes, you still see those students on that virtual lawn, but nobody's sitting close to each other. they're socially distant. Although they're socially distant, they're socially interconnected more than ever before, thanks to the technologies from Abet, right? So that is what has happened with COVID-19. Entire industries have been disrupted. Higher education right now is looking at this whole paradigm. We've always operated with the principle that students come to classes and take courses, do labs, and do various discussions. Maybe there's some things that can be delivered online. Maybe something can be done hybrid. Now, we've been forced due to this disruption to go completely virtual. And I believe that rather than just try to take everything we did before and offer it in an online fashion, this is an opportunity for an institution, a program, to really think about the value of our program. How do students learn? How are we delivering our programs? How can we better do this in the future? That is the challenge before all of us, right? That is what we need to do. So this is how Abet is looking at COVID-19. So we knew, starting in March 2020, faculty and staff are working remotely, courses are transitioning to fully online. My university system, the entire system, 23 campuses, 500,000 students, is completely online for the fall. And we believe that it's going to be completely online for the spring because it's a public health issue. Until we know for sure that we've gotten the better hand on the virus, we're not going to go back to the classroom. Courses are transitioning to fully online. Labs may become unavailable. Some people are doing hybrid labs, online labs, etc. Grading systems have to be changed to accommodate. Students are studying under very difficult circumstances. Data is difficult to collect, analyze, etc. So we understand all of this. Very importantly, on the virtual review, we absolutely will not go to any on-site visit. So all the visits will be handled virtually. All the materials will be provided virtually. We'll use, whatever server you have, Dropbox, email, etc. No printed, USB, any physical format will be either requested or accepted. Facility tours. A big part of what we do during accreditation reviews is actually go and look at the labs and so on. We're actually going to be doing virtual tours of the labs and facilities. Very interesting, right? And I'm actually looking ahead, when we come out of COVID-19, when we do international visits, programs and institutions might say it's very expensive for us to host these visits. Would we be able to do some part of this virtually to save costs? Why not, right? So these are the kind of questions that we need to be thinking about. Interviews. Teams will conduct interviews of faculty, students, staff virtually. Virtual review. Typically on a visit, we provide the initial feedback, the initial draft statement, everything again will happen virtually. We are planning to use Zoom as a default, and the institutional expectations may drive this a little bit, but for the most part, we're going to be using Zoom. Very, very important. We're not going to be judging programs based on how we responded to COVID-19, because we recognize that this is a global problem and institutions, programs, countries are all dealing with this very differently. So this is not based on what you did in the few months to respond to COVID-19. Rather, we're going to be looking at how you've been doing this during the course of your accreditation cycle, right? So if you're initially accredited, say 4 years ago, 5 years ago, what's your process? What's your criteria? What's your collection data? How are you doing that over the course of that cycle rather than just putting a microscope and looking at it one shot in time? And we'll be very reasonable with our decision making without compromising what it means with the integrity of the review. Okay. One concession we made, if you carefully looked at the timeline, we were going to start in September, right? And rather than start in September, we said we'll start in November because we had to do a lot of internal planning. Nobody in Abet knew this was going to happen. So we have to prepare our team chairs, our evaluators to do this virtually. So we said we'll start the visits in November. The other thing that you looked at, the typical visit has 3 days, day 0, day 1, day 2. We said, since we're doing this in a virtual fashion, there's no reason for us to do that in 3 days. We can probably extend it over 1 week. So maybe on one day of that week, you'll be talking to faculty. Another day of the week, you'll be talking to students. Third day, you might be talking to industry constituents, right? It can be very flexible. So we spread that over 1 week. The other consideration here is that everybody is going to be in a different time zone, right? As you look at the world, the evaluators may be in one time zone, the commissioners may be in one time zone, institutions may be in one time zone, students may be in a different time zone. So we want to accommodate all of this. And we felt that we needed some additional time in order to compete and do this, complete this. So the only other requirement is, let's say your visit is in November, we ask that you provide the materials at least 1 month in advance. So all the institutions know this now. They already know this, and we're in July. So they know that they have to provide them 1 month in advance, and PEVs can begin looking at that and so forth, right? The other critical thing to notice here is that everybody needs training. The institutions need to be trained, the PEVs need to be trained, team members need to have access to software. So there's extensive training protocols that are being put in place right now, and especially when this translation is needed, this may take some extra time. I can tell you on visits that I've been, in face-to-face visits, where English was not the local language, the institution often would provide a translator to accompany me on the visit. So the visit would go something like this. If I was talking to the faculty, I would ask the question in English, the translator would translate that to the local language, the faculty member would respond in the local language, the translator would respond back to me in English. So this is a long cycle, so that simple conversation communication now can take 2 times the amount of time that it did before. And you add the virtual modality to it, it can take even longer, right? So very, very critical that we do that. Facility tours. Here we've been very, very entrepreneurial, I want to say. We've told all the institutions they can produce short videos, up to 10 minutes per lab, 1 video per lab or location. So we don't ask for studio quality, just use your smartphone. We need audio and video, include the name, location, where it is, what courses it supports, what equipment it has. That's it. And once it's done, we want you to upload the video so that the evaluators can be looking at it, and they can also be looking at the various instruments and equipment used. Remember, this is no different than looking at a video or looking at a movie saying, these are the facilities, these are the labs. Now, how do we know that all of that is authentic? Very important. The team may request a live on-camera walkthrough if the facilities are accessible. So when we have the virtual visit, we may say, we would like you to take us through with your smartphone and show us exactly what you said was there in the video, right, as backup. So we've done a lot of changes to accommodate what may happen during this virtual visit. Interviews, again, everything would happen virtually, same way we're doing this virtual webinar, but we'll put it all together and we'll have faculty located in one place, talking to the PEV, talking to the various constituents. Very important, the hardware, software, IT requirements, everything works together. I'm getting close to the end of my talk, and I want to finish with a note that shows you the optimism that comes with engineering. This publication is from the National Academy of Engineering, and you can download it, the US National Academy of Engineering, called nae.org. And they brought this out in 2008. And it's very important to me because it really speaks to me about how engineering is addressing the challenges with COVID-19. No profession unleashes the spirit of innovation like engineering. From research to real-world applications, engineers are constantly discovering how to improve our lives by creating bold new solutions that connect science to life in unexpected, forward-thinking ways. Few professions turn so many ideas into so many realities, and few have such a direct and positive impact on people's everyday lives. We are counting on engineers and their imaginations to help us meet the needs of the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't tell you how critical the work we do in engineering and computer science is going to be, not just for the future of our profession, not for our students, not for our members, but for a collective envisioned future, engineering the future. I know I went through a lot of material in a very short period of time. If you're interested in more resources, please go to the Abet website. There is a 6-part educational series that talks about all aspects of accreditation. These are 10-minute videos that cover everything from students to outcomes to accreditation, etc. Please take a look at this at your convenience. They may have taken it down right now just to make changes for the virtual visits, but I'm sure it'll be up shortly. So take a look at that. Abet also has a symposium, annual symposium, which we had to cancel this year, but the annual symposium, depending on the situation with COVID, may be either virtual or hybrid or face-to-face, who knows. But feel free to participate in that because that's one way for you to improve your knowledge of accreditation processes and so forth. So with that said, this is how you can contact me, s.ramesh@ieee.org. That's my LinkedIn connection. Since almost everybody on the audience is with an international program or institution, you may have a very specific question. The person in Abet whom you need to contact is Ms. Sherry Hirsch, shirsch@abet.org. So let me stop sharing at the moment and turn the podium back to Professor El-Babab. Thank you so much, Professor El-Babab. President Khalil, Dina-san. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
very much, Professor Ramesh. It's a wonderful and comprehensive presentation, and we appreciate very much sharing your experience with us. This
Thank you,
is
sir.
a great presentation. Dr.
Thank
Tade,
you.
we have some questions I know coming through the chat lines and through
Yes.
Facebook, so please go ahead.
Sure. We have plenty of questions of the chat, not as many with the Facebook, but let me go ahead with what we have. So I have from Mustafa Adwan, where does employability appear in Abit criteria?
That's a good question. And we are preparing graduates of professional practice. And I want to answer this question this way. If you go to Indeed.com, right? And Indeed.com is a site where people look for jobs. And I recommend you type in Abet there and look at the number of searches that come up. When I did this about a week ago, it came up about 7,000 times on Indeed.com. In other words, industry is telling us that they're looking for graduates from Abet accredited programs. So our criteria, I believe, speak directly to what industry is looking for. In other words, we need students to work on teams. We need students to be able to solve problems. We need to be able to solve design challenges, need to be able to work with diverse, culturally sensitive issues, and ultimately produce products and processes that are safe. Safety is a big part of Abet, right? So industry certainly recognizes that, and we're not static in our criteria. Our criteria are constantly changing with input from you, the member societies, you, the members, you, the students, and you, the employers. So this process is a very, very tightly, closely knit process of continuous improvement. So it speaks directly to employability.
It's also, I mean, if you look at criteria such as lifelong learning,
yes,
that the teams look at when they come. So if anything applies to tomorrow's engineer, it's lifelong learning, because the stuff you actually learn at college expires pretty soon, and so if you're not prepared
continuously.
Yeah. Another question from Muhammad Darabi. If a program is accredited, when shall it need to be reaccredited or revisited again? I think you have to say about the 2 and 6 years.
Correct. So we didn't get a chance, Professor Al-Rabi, to get into the details of the accreditation. So the accreditation, again, is just looking at compliance with the criteria at the point in time that the team visited it, and then maybe there's some back and forth and due process. And then finally, the commission is the one that votes on the accreditation action. So let's say the commission finds that there are no shortcomings or no what we call weaknesses in the process. That could be a shortcoming. It could be a concern that somehow in the future the criteria may not be met, but at the present time it is being met. So the commission votes that the level of shortcomings is such that there are no weaknesses, no deficiencies. In that case, you come up with what is known as an NGR, Next General Review. And that is a 6-year period. So in other words, if you're visited, let's say we're in 2020, your next visit will not occur until 2026, which also means that you need to begin preparing for the 2026 visit in 2025, right? So you'd start writing your self-study, you'll start creating things and so on. And then depending on the nature and the flavor of the shortcoming, if you have a deficiency and you're previously accredited, then you need to address the deficiency. You get what is known as a show cause, and you have a period of time, typically 1 year, within which to respond. If you have a lesser shortcoming, a weakness, right, that you can attend to, you may either be asked to submit a report within a couple of years, or they may see that the weakness is such that we really need to come back and see. And I'll give you an example. Maybe there's a lab that had some serious safety issues, and the institution told you, we're working on it, we're going to build a fume hood, we're going to do all of these things, we're going to make sure people have training. No matter how many videos you see, I know we're doing virtual visits, no matter how many videos you see, you may want to have verification that it happens. So perhaps you do a virtual visit there. The circumstances will vary depending on the institution and the program. But the typical accreditation, when there are no findings, no shortcomings, is 6 years. And incidentally, you're not allowed to say that we're accredited for 6 years. All you're allowed to say is we were accredited in 2020. And anybody can go to the Abet website and they can see which programs that are currently accredited, and which programs, if you're not accredited, basically you can't publicize it on your website. So I hope that answers your question.
I have another question from Muhammad Izzat. Do the detailed criteria take advantage of the ISO 21001 standard?
Most definitely, because the ISO standard is at the global level. And by that, I mean, Abet as an organization is ISO 9001:2015 certified, right? The 2018 criteria just came up. There are 7 principles of quality management. So our processes are pretty rigorous. That whole evaluation assessment process, once a team leaves it, it goes through 2 editors. Then it goes to the consistency committee. I was working night and day last week because I was in the consistency committee, and the panels were coming back with recommendations. So that's how Abet meets the ISO process. Now, internally, the professional organizations, IEEE or ASME, etc., will be responsible for defining the criteria. It'll go to the commission. The commission will send it to the board of delegates. Board of delegates may send it back to the Accreditation Council. So you see, there's always this loop, continuous improvement loop, that is involved in our governance, in our implementation. So it speaks really to quality management, right? It's not ISO 9004. We're not about implementation. We're looking at processes, ISO 9001.
Thank you, Ramesh. Another question from Mohammed Shitawi. What's the average cost per program accreditation? Overall cost, including fees, visits, everything. I guess probably, I mean, he's asking about an international program, because I know that the cost would differ if you are going a US program or international.
Well, rather than try to give dollars and cents and figures right here, if you go to the Abet website, right, abet.org, and you click on Abet accreditation, and you can actually see the current numbers, the cost of accreditation if you're a domestic program, to an international program, etc. Now, what I will tell you is that Abet is very, very sensitive to the cost of accreditation, because we want to do this in a sustainable way. The member societies pay for the operation of Abet, because all the member societies pay for governance. So for example, IEEE is the largest member society within Abet. And if you remember from my slides, there's approximately 1,000 programs that IEEE is responsible for, right? Out of those, about 800 are in the United States. For each one of those 800 programs, IEEE pays what is known as a curricular fee, right? So it used to be $250. So 800 times 250, you can do the math. That's $200,000 a year, right? That IEEE pays to Abet to be a member society. So a smaller member society that has 2 programs may pay $500. IEEE pays $200,000. Now, that is just on the member society side. We haven't even talked about institutions. The institutions, the international institutions, have to pay for the cost of accreditation, right? In other words, when a team comes to Egypt, to the American University in Cairo, or the Arab University of Science and Technology, the team's travel cost is completely borne by the institution, right? It does not come from the member society. So rather than go into details, kindly look at the Abet website. Obviously, there is a big savings right now for international programs that are being listed, because the travel cost is the bulk of the cost of accreditation for international programs. There is a cost per program, and then there's a cost for the team. But when I talk to international programs, I want to say, on the average, maybe the 70 to 80% of the cost of accreditation is in the travel cost and hosting the team, etc.
Next question is from Ahmad Farag. In your opinion, will we come to a time where IEEE and IET, I don't think that you can speak for IET, the IEEE and IET accreditation are exchangeable between the 2 institutions, so HEI choose one and get accredited for both? I think he missed the point that IEEE actually is not accredited. But
well, 2 things. Yeah, 2 things, right? So he's referring to IET. And in one of the slides, I talked about it, and I said accreditation is voluntary, number 1. And IEEE is part of the International Engineering Alliance. IET, you're looking at certifications. So it's really up to the institution to determine what direction they go. So Abet recognizes there are local, there are regional, there are national bodies that do accreditation. Each one of them has their own principles. For example, In the United States, we have something known as the Council for Higher Education Administration, or CHIA, right? And Abet used to be a part of CHIA. We withdrew from CHIA because the CHIA requirements changed. And the CHIA requirements required all member organizations to not only post basic data. Right now, if you're an Abet accredited program, you have to post data on your enrollment. You have to post data on your objectives and outcomes. You have to post data on your number of graduates. But CHIA went a little bit further and said, we need programs to say what the status of accreditation was, why they were not, or why they were accredited or not, what the shortcoming was. It got into a lot of detail. To us, that is confidential between the program and Abet. In other words, the whole idea behind accreditation is demonstrating compliance with criteria, and that can only be done in a forum that is trusted. And we cannot do that if we're just going to go out and say this program had this shortcoming and that program had this shortcoming. All we can do is to show the program directly what they need to do to continuously improve. So we withdrew from that. So the point that I'm making here is that we are part of the Washington Accord. Currently, there are 20 signatories to the Washington Accord. If you come from a program that is a Washington Accord accredited program, we have a mutual recognition agreement. So if you were to apply for a job and the job says you need an Abet accredited degree in electrical engineering, and you happen to come from a program that has an MRA, you will be considered the same, right? And you have substantial equivalencies in other cases, but IET certification is not the direction in which we're going to go. We're all about accreditation. We're all about doing this voluntarily, and we will continue to push the envelope, right? Because as a global accreditor, we did not acquire our status overnight. It's been 85 years in the making, and it's been 36 member societies, one society at a time, and we continue to get interest from member societies who want to join Abet.
It's a different system there.
Very different.
I think there is a question I can see which was missed, not in the. Somebody, Ahmed Sharaf, was asking ILOs versus competencies. Which way Abet is going, and what's your opinion?
Let me guess, Tariq. When he's talking about ILOs, is he talking about institutional learning outcomes? I'll assume that is the case.
I think it's called incremental learning outcomes.
Incremental, okay.
Yeah, I think
I'm
so.
glad I asked.
Don't quote me for it. When you get used
I'm
to
glad
that,
I asked. Okay.
when
Student outcomes.
Yeah, you can get used to that, to an acronym to the extent that you forget what it stands for.
What it stands for, right? So in Abet, we talk about program education objectives and student outcomes. And the latter part of the question, Tariq, please repeat that for me. ILOs versus?
ILOs versus competencies.
Competencies, okay.
Which way Abet is going, and what's your opinion? Are we heading ILOs or heading to competence, measuring competencies?
Okay, let me just say this. Student outcomes demonstrate three things: knowledge, skills, abilities, right? Or knowledge, skills, and behaviors. It is very, very critical. If you look at the outcomes for engineering right now, 1 through 7, complex problem solving, design, working on teams, lifelong learning.
Ahmed made a clarification. It's intended learning outcomes.
Intended, okay. So if you look at student outcomes, right? So we have 7 of them right now under the Engineering Accreditation Commission. It used to be A through K. We modified that through 1 through 7, going back a year or so ago. Now, when you look at 1 through 7, it doesn't say that 1 through 7 has to be met in one course. It doesn't say that all outcomes need to be met across the program. What we're looking for is that the graduate, she or he coming out of your program, at the time of graduation, snapshot, is able to demonstrate holistically all of these outcomes. So the program might come and say, and I'll give you an example. We didn't get into it today, but I actually have it in my supplemental slides that Professor Al-Bawab can share with all of you. A program might say, we have 7 outcomes. We're going to go through a cycle, 3-year cycle. So in the first cycle, we'll measure outcomes 1 and 2. In the second cycle, we'll measure 3 and 4. And then in the third cycle, we'll measure 5, 6, and 7, okay? And then we'll do assessment in the next one. We'll do evaluation in the next one. And this is like, we're all working from home. So we're used to doing laundry, wash, rinse, repeat. We do assess, evaluate, continuous improvement, right? So we repeat it again for the next cycle and do it again, right? So that's one way to do it. Some of the programs might say, well, we do course embedded assessment. I'm teaching a course in circuits, and this part of circuits relates to this outcome. I'm going to measure it. I'm going to quantify it with a rubric, and I'm going to figure out how all of my students. There is no set rubric. You can define your own rubric. You can define your own categories of competence. but really the competence plays a part in demonstrating the outcome. So at the end of the day, what are the knowledge, skills, abilities, the behaviors that your students need to demonstrate? What is the threshold that you as a program set? Abet will not come and tell you 90% is good, 80% is bad. You set the threshold. Your faculty set the threshold. You talk to your constituents. You try to figure out how well it's working. If things are not working as you expected, go back and say, what can I do to improve, right? So it's a very introspective process that causes you to reflect on what is happening and make changes accordingly.
Thank you, Ramesh. Next question would be from Ahmed Shitawi again. Do you have a support team to guide the program quality team in preparing documentation and or FAQs, or they are just left with the general guidelines of Abet? I think you organize a workshop and the stuff like this. Or...
So I think his question is relating to how institutions and programs can prepare for accreditation, if I can paraphrase. Right?
Yes.
So what happens, Professor, is that there is a institutional day, right? Now, this used to happen in July. So if you're an institution that is coming up for Abet accreditation, typically your dean, your president, whoever is responsible would travel to Washington, D.C. or Baltimore and attend this institutional day, where you'll go through a series of workshops where they'll talk about all the different processes that we'll be using. And then you'll actually get to meet with your actual team chair, right? She or he. And remember, the institution plays a part in approving or not approving who is coming to your institution to be an evaluator. So when the member society chooses an evaluator, then the team chair will communicate with the dean of the institution and say, so-and-so has been appointed as an evaluator. I've checked with that person. They've indicated they don't have a conflict of interest with their institution. Do you have any conflict of interest? And a conflict of interest is if somebody graduated from your program or they've had some kind of a fiduciary relationship with your program. They've done consulting with you. They'll come and talk to you about how to implement a continuous improvement process. They can't turn around and come back to you and be an evaluator and say, this is how they did it, right? Abet tries to really be very, very clear and distinct and keeping those processes at arm's length. So you get plenty of guidance there. And then on the criteria themselves, and this is internal because your faculty are the one that are monitoring the outcomes assessment process, and you have rubrics and you have measurements, you have evaluation, assessment. Abet does annual symposia. There's a day-long workshop on each of these processes. On my slides, I talked to you about the 6 workshops that are available on the web. Each are 10-minute workshops. I've been doing a lot of these, by the way, for the last 2 months. I did a 3-part workshop on Abet accreditation. All of these are out on the web. The videos are out on the web. You're more than welcome to view them. So officially, Abet will have an institutional day to help evaluators to help and connect them with the institution so they're prepared for it. And there's constant communication. This is the beauty of Abet accreditation. The moment your team is assigned, the PEV begins talking to the department head, whoever she or he is, and they start asking questions, right? And it's no surprises. When we show up on the campus, either virtually this time or in face-to-face mode, we know, right? We pretty much know where the issues are. Everybody knows, everybody's on the same table. And the idea is that we work together to help the program improve, right? Because the program is very close to the students, the curriculum, etc. Sometimes you may miss the forest for the trees. Just having an independent evaluation come there helps you in turn make it a better process for your students. Again, you're not competing with anybody. You're not publicizing this saying, look how good we are compared to the others. It's all about you making yourself better for your students, for your constituents.
I think I may add also for Ahmed information. Lots of program evaluators do some. I mean, if you know an evaluator and invite him to give you a talk about how Abet does things, this happens a lot. Remember, Ramesh, Ed Jones used to do lots of these. I mean, he would go to programs. I mean, it's not for profit or anything. All you have to do is to invite him and get some. I remember at Jackson State, we got him.
Indeed. There are a lot of resources, and Abet themselves, the Abet professional staff, there are a number of adjuncts on the Abet professional staff. So if you have a unique institutional requirement, you can reach out to Abet and they'll customize a program for you and deliver it. So it can be done very easily.
It's not difficult to get some support when you want to do it, especially if you know people. There's a question from Basant Abdulhamid. The questions are getting, I mean, the line is just.
Go for it. Go for it. You know, it's nighttime for you, but it's daytime for me. I can be there as long as you want.
Yeah. Well, I don't sleep early. Don't worry about it. I'm just worried about you losing that momentum after some point in time.
No,
So I
not
have
at
a
all.
question from Basant Abdulhamid. If the program changed the bylaws in 2018, bylaws is a term we use in Egypt, which is not typical there. By bylaws, meaning essentially, I would say the curriculum and the design.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if a program changed the bylaws in 2018, then can it apply to Abit accreditation? Now, I guess this is what she means, or it have to wait until at least some students graduate. She means under the new bylaws, some students graduate to evaluate the program in 2023. Note that this program was started in 2013, but some changes were done in bylaws. So let me. So the program was there in 2013. In 2018, they did changes. They want to apply. Okay, so should we wait until we get graduates under the new 2018 bylaws, or can we do it earlier, you know, incorporating those who are graduated earlier?
Very good. Excellent question, actually. And so I'll start with the assumption that the program is previously accredited, which I believe is true. So they were accredited at a previous time, and then something happened. Maybe the curriculum changed, maybe the faculty changed, or maybe the method of delivery changed, right? We're seeing this a lot. So program.
I'm sensing she means it's not, but you know, go ahead. It's not clear, but maybe she means that it's not accredited at all, and she's trying to start from scratch. So maybe you give answers to the two possibilities.
Absolutely, I'll address that as well. But let me start with the premise that the program was previously accredited. Let's talk about that case first, right? So it's previously accredited, and perhaps something changed, either in terms of criteria, meaning, you know, you decided that you're going to change something. Now, we have something known as a substantive change, right, versus a non-substantive change. And I can give you an example, okay? I was a department chair for a number of years, and when students took a course on circuits, the first course on circuits, as you know, most courses in circuits will require a background in differential equations, will require you to understand physics, which is electricity and magnetism. Why do we need that? Because we start with DC circuits, then we move on to transient circuits, where we typically deal with first order differential equations, with homogeneous coefficients, etc. Then we lead with second order differential equations. Then we go to, you know, higher order circuits, RLCs, and so on. And eventually we go to sinusoidal circuits. So in our program, we had built this hierarchical sequence where a student first had to complete differential equations, and they had to take physics and electricity and magnetism before that, and before they could take circuits. So it's a three-step process. So if somebody failed a class in between, they'd have to go back and take the class before they could get into circuits. So it led to a logjam, right? A lot of them are having difficulty going through it. So the faculty said, you know, there's a lot of synergy between circuits and differential equations. So if you look at the curriculum in differential equations, first order, second order differential equations, I can almost be teaching that concept in math, and at the same time, I could be teaching RL, RC, RLC circuits and circuits. Can we then allow students to take differential equations as a co-requisite, as a concurrent requisite, and allow them to have the conceptual basis, physics, electricity, and magnetism as a prerequisite? That to me is a non-substantive change, right? Because the program decided that would be better for them, and they decided they would do that. Now take something where a program essentially is offering its courses face-to-face. Everything is being offered face-to-face. And something happened, there was an economic disruption, COVID happened, I don't know, right? Something radical happened. And the program said, okay, from now on, everything on this campus, every single program has to be offered online. Nobody's going to come to campus, right? Which is the truth right now. And that's going to be the way it is going forward. Now the question that the program needs to ask itself, is it still in compliance with that criteria? Is it a substantive change, right? So if you're not sure, you can always ask Abet. And Abet, again, doesn't arbitrarily decide. Abet sends it to the respective commission, and they look at the individual situation and tell you if it's substantive or not. And if it is substantive, and then, yes, you would need to go through the process of requesting reaccreditation. When do you request it? You need to have at least one graduate from the program under the new criteria before you request reaccreditation. If you are initially requesting accreditation, step number 1 or step 0 is the readiness review, right? Because you don't have an accredited program. So by November 1, complete the draft self-study, submit the draft self-study. It goes to Abet, the adjuncts and a small group of staff look at it, and they can come back to you with 3 recommendations. You're good to go. Go ahead and submit a request for evaluation. Maybe you need to fix a couple of things, and you can submit a request for evaluation by January 31. Or maybe you're not quite ready yet. When you fixed all these things, come back and submit a readiness review, right? So I hope I answered both those questions. Substantive versus non-substantive for programs that are previously accredited. And if in doubt, again, please don't hesitate to ask, because Abet will get you an answer immediately, right? Because each situation is unique. We understand that.
Basant is also asking another question after this one, and I guess now if they are planning to purchase some equipment, they will plan to purchase some telecom equipment for a telecom laboratory, and then due to the COVID-19 situation, probably things cannot be shipped. She's asking whether you recommend that the program to apply for accreditation under such conditions, or basically wait until they are able to purchase the equipment. I recall situations when Abit evaluators where they would accept if you present a proof of purchase, okay? And I know of other situations when this is not the case. So maybe you want to answer the question for her.
Absolutely. And so the question here is, did the program already apply for accreditation? In other words, if you submitted a request for evaluation by January 31st year, you're already in the accreditation cycle, right? And then maybe you wanted to purchase some equipment in March, and everything shut down, supply chains are disrupted all over the world, and you're not able to get the equipment. Abet understands that. Remember what I said. We're not just going to be looking at March 2020 and your response to Abet accreditation. We'll take that into account, knowing that that was part of your request. But if your question is, in 2021, meaning the coming January, I'm going to apply for Abet accreditation, and your plan is to purchase this equipment, now you're putting a whole different light on it because you haven't applied yet, right? You're going to apply in 2021 for a review that's going to take place in 2021. So your plan is to purchase it. So we'd expect to know what happens under that circumstance if your plan doesn't materialize. So if you've already requested an evaluation and you're in the cycle this year, I would say don't worry about it, because that will be taken into consideration by the review teams, and they'll be looking at the totality of the information during the cycle. If you're going to apply for accreditation in the next year, and this is part of your plans, then the teams would rightfully expect what your contingencies are. In other words, if that doesn't materialize, is that going to compromise something? Is it going to compromise the delivery of a particular criteria, right? Compliance with a particular criteria. And that is something that you need to really look at very carefully. I would argue that one piece of equipment in one lab is not going to make or break when it comes to the criteria. It's not that critical, because again, Abet criteria are very broad, right? These outcomes are being demonstrated by students across the length and breadth of the program. And so when you look at it in that context, you can easily make the case and say, you know, we are applying for accreditation in 2021. This is our plan. But by the way, you know, our budgets are completely uncertain, right? I live in California. My university is facing a 10% budget cut, 10%, okay? That's just on paper. That's from the state of California. We also know that our enrollment is going to drop, which means that tuition is going to drop. So it may actually turn out to be more like a 20% cut. You know, how does the program buy equipment? So there's so many factors that you don't control, and we understand that, right? So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask, right? That's my advice to you. If you're already in the cycle, don't worry about it. If you're applying in the next cycle, look at the impact on your ability to demonstrate compliance with the criteria. That's got to be the overriding factor.
Okay, next one is a good question. I've been waiting for actually for a while. It's coming from Professor Ahmed Amin. He's talking about Makai. And we have, I think, Professor Johansson with us.
Can you repeat that? I missed the first word.
The name is Nakai, Naqaae. Is a government body in Egypt that's in charge of accreditation. It was founded in 2007. And I was really waiting for this question, especially that we have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, we have Professor Johansson, who's heading NACAI. I think she's here. But let me read the question of Ahmed first. NACAI is a governmental body formed in 2007 with the purpose of establishing quality standards for Egypt's educational institution. As we know, NARS, which is standards under there, so NARS for engineering is 90% Abit based. So the Abit model and the Abit concepts is adapted to some extent, and I've seen this myself, to tell you the truth. It's Abit based. So why not consider MOU or something like this between Abit and NACAI for dual supervision and approval of the accreditation processes?
Excellent question. Thank you. So the body NACAI, and I don't pretend to be able to repeat what Professor Al-Bawab just told me about that national body. I know I got quality and accreditation improvement, but that body is a nationally recognized body in Egypt.
Dr. Johansson, she was with us. She is with us. And after you answer, she would. I would probably ask her to say something. But go ahead.
No worries. But that's a nationally accredited body. I just want to get it right. So that's the national body in Egypt that all higher education institutions look to, right? And so Abet recognizes that. Now, there are two things here. Remember, we talked about signatories to the accord, right? And you have what is known as mutual recognition agreements between the signatories of the accord. So these are all signatories to either Washington, Dublin, Seoul, and so on. Then you have substantial, it's called mutual recognition or substantial equivalency. Now, this can be done by Abet with bodies like NACAI. So for example, in India, we started working with NBA, which is a national board for accreditation, about a decade ago. And the National Board of Accreditation has its own hierarchy and institutions and so on. And they have a group of institutions called Tier 1 institutions that essentially have autonomy over their curriculum. Their criteria are very similar to Abet criteria. The way they are implemented may be a little bit different, but the criteria are very similar. So they went through a process where we had a equivalency, and then eventually NBA Tier 1 programs became Washington Accord accredited. So the equivalency arguments, mutual recognition agreements can start at any time. So NACAI can begin talking with Abet about how we can develop the process. So you may have that substantial equivalency between the two programs, but to get to an MRA, which is only done for an accord, that takes a step-by-step process. You have to become a provisional signatory, then you have to become a full signatory, and so on and so forth. But the substantial equivalency conversations can start at any time, right? So as a body responsible for higher education in Egypt, you're more than welcome to connect with Abet. And I can certainly pass it along to Abet. If there's anybody interested on your side who needs to be part of that conversation, they can begin the conversation tomorrow.
Professor Johansson, can you, please unmute. And by the way, Dr. Amr Mohammed El-Maghabi explained to me that NACAI stands for National Authority for Quality Assurance and Accreditation of Education. Dr. NACAI, Dr. Johansson, come in, please. I'm so sorry. I have to apologize. It has been a long day.
Don't call me Dr. Abet. I'm not Dr. Abet.
I have been preparing for this for a whole day. So you forgive me, huh?
Yeah. You're forgiven, Doctor.
You have to forgive me because you are visiting us soon, huh? Otherwise I am in big trouble.
No, you're not. Don't worry. You know, I cherish Nile University. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, welcome, Dr. Ramesh. I really enjoyed the presentation. Yeah, and I got my education, my PhD from USC in California, so I know the weather there, and I can understand how hot it really gets. But anyways, we have started conversation with Abet. As a matter of fact, I was at the CHIA conference for the last couple of years, and I met with some of the members of Abet. We do have an old MOU signed with Abet. We have not materialized that in any ways yet. we started the conversation this year, and the conversation started taking a real, an actual good path. And then we had a conference in March, on the 23rd of March, 2020, and this just fell apart of course. And so basically all our works has halted a bit. We started picking up a conversation this, as a matter of fact, we arranged it. Yeah, I don't know who right now. I do know of Professor. His name is Ayman Elbaz. He's an Egyptian who's willing to help. He is, I think, a reviewer and part. Yeah, and so basically, but I would be more than, if you would send me who I should contact, I'd be more than happy to start these conversations on behalf of our institution, and of course for the good of all the engineering and technical universities.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Johansson. So 2 names, Daniela Ayakona is the staff lead for the Global Council, and she would be one of the persons involved, Daniela. And the other person is Professor Jamie Rogers, who is a past president of Abet and is the chair of the Global Council. So they would be the 2 individuals, and I can share their contact information with you so you can continue the conversation with them.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks.
If you send me this info, I can send her to her immediately.
Yes. And if I would like to add, if you would allow me to add something regarding, because probably everybody is wondering what we will be doing about our visits next year. We will have what I'm calling right now hybrid visits. So we will basically, part of what you said, Professor Ramesh, is what we're doing about the virtual meetings and virtual campus tours and so on. But we will have at least a 1-day actual visit where we are going to look at all the facilities just to make sure. So, there will be some kind of an actual visit, but not with all the team and not for the long day. And we've extended the visit for maybe over the course of a week to make sure that, because online meetings are not the same as face, as actual visits. So I just wanted, just because I have everybody around and probably everybody is asking now that you've said what you're doing next year. So I'm sure everybody is waiting for us to say what we will be doing. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Professor Johansson. The one point I want to make to you, obviously Abet had to pivot and change a lot of organizations this year. But speaking with the PEVs and commissioners and so on, everybody wants to be able to do face-to-face visits, right? And there's no question. But at the same time, I'm thinking about that used to be the world of before, right? And back is not the way forward. So we need to be really thinking ahead on how this is going to happen. I'm predicting that hybrid visits may happen. In the past, we've had either a natural disaster or maybe there was some political issues in certain parts of the world where we've not been able to go, an Abet team has not been able to go physically, but we've had somebody locally, that person, she or he, served as the eyes and ears of Abet locally, and then the remote team from Abet headquarters interacted with that person. Now, these were in the single digits, 1, 2, 3 programs that we did, right? And we thought that was a grand experiment. But wait till 2020. Nobody told us about 2020. Now suddenly we're doing this for hundreds of programs, for hundreds and thousands of volunteer hours. So I think we've just started on an interesting path, just like higher education has been disrupted. And some might argue it is time we got disrupted because learning is important and we focused a long time on an outmoded model on scarcity, and we need to talk about abundance and how we can take advantage of the opportunities that we have. So I'm really predicting good things to come out of it. So don't worry about it. Let's just be proud of our collective humanity and the solutions that we'll come up with in the future.
That's true. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Johansson. I have a question from Abdulhamid Taha. Recent changes in EAC, criteria, I think it's EAC policy, means a stronger alignment with the Washington Accord, especially with regards to complex problems and engineering design. Does this mean a stronger emphasis on summative assessment in the program? And he has another question about the qualification, what it takes to be a program evaluator, I think.
Okay, let me answer the first question first. Correct. Complex problem solving was something that was defined in the revised general criteria under criterion 3. And if I was doing a different webinar, I would actually go into a little bit more detail about the facets of it. And so what Abet has done is defined a number of elements that constitute complex problem solving. And what is important for the programs to understand is that you don't need to have all of those elements as part of your program. It is enough if you have one or some of those elements. But if you have none of those elements, you have a problem, right? No pun intended. It's a simple problem, but you have to have some of those elements as part of the definition of complex problem solving. In particular, the society called INCOSE, Systems Engineering. So they were very, very keen on finding out, how programs have fared with this. And just statistically, because I can't obviously reveal to you what the actions are with various programs, but statistically, none of the programs in the last review cycle seem to have had any issues with demonstrating compliance with the complex problem solving criteria. What is important here, again, is to understand that complex problem solving is a multifaceted issue, and you just need to be able to demonstrate one or some of those attributes as part of your curriculum. Tariq, forgive me, I lost track of the second part of the question. What was the second part of the question?
The second question, Abdul Hamid was wondering about what it takes to be a program evaluator.
Oh, correct. Thank you. So program evaluators, Professor Hamid, are selected by the respective member societies. So every member society has a call for program evaluators. IEEE, for example, it comes under the Educational Activities Board. We have two committees, Committee for Engineering Accreditation Activities, CEAA, and Committee for Engineering Technology Accreditation Activities, CETAA. So if you go to the IEEE page, on the main IEEE page, IEEE.org, there is a tab that says Education. Click on that. It'll take you to IEEE Educational Activities. Log in with your IEEE account. I'm assuming you're an IEEE member. Log in with your IEEE account. And then from there, you should be able to see the process, what it requires for you to do in terms of submitting. So typically, they'll ask you for your experience. They'll ask you to submit a CV. And maybe you have to submit a cover letter on why you're interested, etc. Now, what happens is this committee that I told you is made up of, I want to say, between 20 and 25 individuals, the Committee on Engineering Accreditation Activities. They're seasoned program evaluators. Some of them are team chairs. So they sit down, each person independently evaluates every single application against a set of criteria. There are 6 criteria that we look for, competencies for a program evaluator. These are common for all the member societies. So if you go to abet.org, www.abet.org, and click on what it means to become a PEV, you can see the competencies, right? To be professionally competent, to be a good communicator, to be a good listener, to be able to work with people, to be collaborative, to take other points of view into account, and so forth. So every application gets evaluated by the individual members of CEAA. All the scores are compiled. This is a very strictly merit-driven process, but it also looks very closely at diversity and equity, because Abet, again, is a worldwide organization. We are really, really focused on getting as many diverse individuals as we can, no matter what your orientation, no matter what your culture, no matter what your language, to be able to participate in this. Now, this year, none of the evaluators who were selected as new evaluators will be able to go on visits. Why? Because the training had to be canceled, right? The training would have been face-to-face. It had to be canceled. So no new PEVs are being assigned to visits. And neither are we doing any new initial accreditations. We're only looking at the reaccreditation of programs. So I'd say if you're interested, please take a look at that. Submit your application. And I want to tell you, don't be disappointed if you're not selected the first time, right? When I applied first to be an evaluator, this is very early in my career, I was not selected, okay? And I just went back and looked at it. And at that time, they said the focus is, we're looking for people from industry. We already have a lot of people from academia for evaluators. So even though you're highly qualified, et cetera, we are not really looking for someone for academia, looking from industry. I took that as fine. I waited a few more years, and I actually reapplied when I was a dean. And you say, you must be crazy. Why did you do it as a dean? I did that because I wanted my faculty to take accreditation seriously. And I said, look, if I can do this as an evaluator, if I can take time out of my day to go and be part of Abet, little did I know that I would get into the governance structure and soon find myself as a chair of the delegation. I mean, that's a different story, but that seems to be the story of my life. I put my hands into a lot of things that I care about. So apply. You know, if you want to be an evaluator, apply.
It's November, Abdul Hamid. I mean, the date usually, deadline to apply is November. I'm going to, we have here with us Dr. Wael Aql. Dr. Wael is our provost, and he wants to comment on the virtual auditing process. And Dr. Wael, please unmute and speak up. Dr. Wael?
Yes, I just managed to unmute myself because I wasn't able to. I mean, thank you very much, Professor Ramesh, I mean, for the wisdom, for the very interesting talk. It's very inspiring, actually, and it encourages us, I mean, to go all and apply for Abet. It seems like a straightforward process where I know that there are some details that lie beneath the surface that are really challenging for everyone. But I believe this is a very good opportunity for us. And thanks, Dr. Tarek Bawab, for the invitation and for sharing this experience. I'm just commenting, actually, and extending the discussion with the Professor Johansson, the chair of NACAI. As actually, we believe that Abet or NACAI or whatever accrediting body is not some sort of a policeman who really forces some sort of rules or regulations like a sword on the throats of people, but we believe that it's actually an extension for how we can really improve and some sort of a counselor for how to improve our process. That's why I just want to say that about the virtual visits and the virtual auditing process that you have mentioned and that Professor Johansson has mentioned partially for NACAI, is that out of transparency between the institutions and the accrediting body or the quality assurance supporting body, there should be some sort of channel or live streaming of data that actually the accrediting body should have access to in order to have real-time visuals on the progress of the institution, so that to have some preemptive actions or preemptive advice for the institutions to take care of and to warn them if one of the indicators or one of the criteria or one of the KPIs are falling back or something like that. I believe this is something that it needs some sort of initial momentum from both the institution management as well as from the accrediting body management to release such data on a real-time basis for the accrediting body. But this is where I believe this is going to be very helpful in order to make sure that we are not in a state of collecting all the manpower in the institution to apply for accreditation for 3 months. We stop working, we start preparing all the documentation. But if we do it right on IT basis, this can be actually, it's an ongoing process that you never going to spend a dedicated time for that. We have actually started a project with 3 universities in Egypt, and NACAI has partnered with us to establish such virtual online platform sharing this information between the institution and the NACAI as the accrediting body representing the accreditation system, so that they will have a continuous picture of what's going on inside the institutions. Of course, this is the data that can be disclosed to NACAI. It doesn't contain any financial data, but these are the self-assessment data monitored in real time. Really, if you are going, or NACAI or Dr. Johansson and the Abet are going to work together, to establish some sort of cooperation in form of matching the impedances between both systems.
I like that.
Would be really very helpful in having some sort of endorsed channel of communication and some sort of data that needs to be posted on a real time with Abet for the sake of improvement and for the sake of preemptive actions, and not to wait until the next year when things are really bad. So that's just a comment about this cooperation and my visual how it should go on. Thank you very much again. And it was really
Thank you, Professor Aql. I fully agree with you. And what you just spoke about speaks to that fundamental concept of transparency, because Abet and the institution want to be very transparent with one another, because we're really there to help the institution. We're really there to help the program. From transparency comes trust, but trust comes accountability, right? Yes, we need to verify, but we need to be transparent first before we can build the trust. So I completely agree with you, and that is the philosophy of Abet. No surprises. We really, really want to do this in such a way that every institution can be the best that they want to be for their faculty, their students, their constituents. It doesn't matter, right? I mean, you don't have to be MIT. You don't have, I mean, not to pick on MIT. You don't have to be MIT, but you can be whoever you want to be in consonance with your mission, in consonance with your vision. And Abet will do everything we can to steward that, to help you to accomplish that. So thank you very much for your leadership and your contributions.
Thank you very much, Professor Ramesh. Thank you.
Still have two questions at least. Do you have any time where you want to leave?
Me?
Ramesh? Yeah.
I've got the whole world behind me. I'm not leaving.
Because at my end we can spend the whole night. I mean,
I've got the whole world behind me. I'm not leaving.
More than 2 hours now.
yeah, it's 2 hours now, and this was our agreement. I still have two questions.
Go for
but
it. Please don't cut off the questions. If you have a question, we're happy to talk.
Okay. So from Osama Demirdash, I think Abit should discuss with it's a Minister of Higher Education. However, technical webinars should take place online to make people understand. I don't think this is a question, but is Abit? Let me extract a question out of this. Is Abit open to discussing with government organizations? I mean, rather because the Ministry of Higher Education is a ministry that runs higher education in Egypt, not necessarily from an accreditation point of view, but from organizing it, from subsidizing it, from supporting it, from whatever. So it's the government as far as higher education is concerned. So I guess his question would be to Abit. Does Abit work with governments?
So typically, Tarek and Professor, thank you for your question. Abit would work with whichever the nationally recognized body is. In this case, it's NACAI and Professor Johansson. So that would be the appropriate point of contact. However, if somebody from the Ministry of Higher Education were to reach out to Abit, Abit's not going to say, no, we can't talk to you. They would find out who the appropriate body is in the country and then involve them in the conversation, because I want to be very clear, right? Abit accreditation is voluntary, and we are very sensitive to the fact that there are regional and national bodies, and we want to ensure that we are talking to the people with the full understanding of the government, right? So if the government, the higher education department is responsible, in other words, if NACAI is reporting, let's say the hierarchy is NACAI is reporting to the higher education department, and the request comes from a different level in the chain, Abet will be very transparent and reach out to NACAI and say, we received this request, we'd like to engage in this conversation, would you like to be a part of it? I think that's how it would proceed.
By the way, does Dr. Johansson still with us? Does Abet report to the Ministry of Higher Education?
NACAI, you mean?
Does NACAI report to the Ministry of... You can tell that was a long day for me. Does NACAI report to وزارة التعليم العالي حضرتك؟
No. We report directly to the Prime Minister. No, wait, hold on. We report directly to the Prime Minister. This is the channel of reporting. If we're talking about reporting, because we are in contact with, we send our reports and we send everything to them. There is a channel of connection between us and the ministry. But we are not under the Ministry of Higher Education. Okay, our chain of command or the hierarchy is with the Prime Minister directly.
As a matter of fact, this makes more sense. This makes more sense. Yeah,
because maybe Professor Ramesh is not aware of that, but we are responsible with the sole accrediting body for both higher and pre-university. So that's why we do not follow either of the ministries. We are an independent autonomous agency, and our chain we report to Parliament and to the Prime Minister directly.
So Abet will be talking to you directly. That's what they should.
Yes, exactly, yes. And like you said, I am aware that Abet would not directly contact, you'll talk to the ministry, yes, but it is not the main channel of conversation. That's yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You will excuse me, Professor Johansson. I just came back to Egypt last September after 25 years being away. So that's why I may ask a question. Everybody else knows the answer about that.
No, don't worry, Dr. Tariq. Even those who've been living in Egypt for more than 25 years still ask that same question. Even I don't want to even say who, you know.
Okay, ma'am. I got the message.
Lifelong learning, Tariq.
Just a minute ago, I was going to tell you I have the last question. And as I'm looking now, there's another question came. So this is not going to be the last.
Go ahead.
The one before the last is from Muhammad al-Maghabi. I think I can answer this one. Do you provide any template or procedure to follow during the preparation for the accreditation phase? I think that you have, the self-study has a template. So if anybody starting the accreditation process, you go and download the template for the self-study from the Abet website, and pretty much all the self-studies has to be in the same. I'm just trying to, I don't want to overload you. So from Ahmed Sharafuddin, the two main points of difference between NACAI and Abet is that NACAI is a governmental agency and application for accreditation is obligatory in Egypt. It's, even though it's not obligatory anyway, if you're not accredited in the US, you are in big trouble. Go ahead. So I think this was a question. He was just, Ahmed was just telling us that the two main points of difference between NACAI and Abet. So NACAI is a governmental agency and the accreditation is obligatory. But I wouldn't say that NACAI accreditation is obligatory so far. I'm not so sure.
So let me respond to the comment. And, you know, I actually appreciated Professor Johansson's comment a minute ago, because it's an autonomous body. It reports directly through Parliament, as she explained. And it's responsible not only for university education, but
to Prime Minister.
But it is responsible for both university and pre-university education, right? So that is internal. That is internal to the country. That is internal to Egypt. Every country has its own structure, policies, and procedures. Now, all that Abet needs to know is that NACAI speaks for the university education community, right? Which they do, because and the fact that it's obligatory or voluntary, I mean, Abet really doesn't get into that business. That is entirely up to the country how they choose to do that. In the United States, we have regional accreditors, and then we have program accreditors and so forth. One of the reasons why institutions continue to have regional accreditation is because of policies when it comes to federal financial aid. So unless you're regionally accredited, your students cannot be eligible for federal financial aid. This is just in the United States, right? So there may be a reason why institutions are seeking regional accreditation in the United States. And on top of that, they may be looking at, in business, for example, there's a group called AACSB, which accredits the entire College of Business, okay? As opposed to Abet, which accredits programs. So it all depends on who your audience is, who your constituents are, what you're trying to do. But at the end of the day, the principles are really very simple, very clear. You want to have students graduating who are prepared for professional practice. You want to assure your students, you want to assure your faculty, you want to assure industry, you want to assure parents, you want to assure industry and government, everybody, that this is something that they need to be investing in. And you're doing that through the successful demonstration of the outcomes. Very, very simple, really easy.
Okay, I guess we came to an end. We can let you go, give you back your freedom. Dr. Tariq, would you like to say, not to make it longer or anything?
I just wanted to thank Professor Ramesh again for a great presentation. It's very useful. It has been enlightening. I thank everybody that participated. I think accreditation is extremely useful. You know, you spent 25 years in the States. I spent 4 years in the States, and I went through 8 cycles of Abet accreditation. So I have been very familiar with Abet, and how it works over the years. And I think it's a wonderful process. It helps institutions, and I think we should be ready for it very soon.
Yes.
I would love to see an actual cooperation between NACAI and Abet. I think it would be helpful and useful and mutually beneficial. Thank you all.
Dr. Ahmed Hassan, the president of the IEEE section in Egypt and my partner in organizing this. Dr. Ahmed Hassan got us a lot of people here. And so, Ahmed, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Dr. Tariq, and thank you a lot, Ramesh, for the informative and interesting presentation. Thank you, Dr. Tariq, for giving us this opportunity. And thank to everybody who made my day today by coming and participating. Thank you all. Without your questions, your comments, this presentation will be lacking the spirit. So thank you all.
Okay, I also second you and second Dr. Tai, and I want to thank Ramesh a lot. My friend, thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it, and appreciate the opportunity to see you again and again. And I want to thank Dr. Johansson in particular for attending here. I think hearing about NACAI and what it does in the same context of our discussion of Abit and IEEE was pretty useful for everybody. I want to thank everybody who took time to come and join us here. Thank you all. I really appreciate your attendance and hope that this talk was useful and have added some value to our perspective of accreditation and our view of higher education in general. Thank you so much, and have a good night.
Professor